Hello everyone, welcome to the AI engineering crash course. Today we'll do the fourth part of the introduction, which is about API and SDK. So, as you can see here, we have talked about AI and AI engineering, the difference between AI engineering, ML, data science, and software engineering. We did a simple introduction to LLMs, and we'll go from this simple introduction to API and SDK. Let's get started. So basically, in the last video, we went from big data, the need for correlation, machine learning algorithms, deep learning, transformers, with just a high level overview of all these things, to here where we have LLMs. But now let's imagine you're a company like OpenAI, build a really big model. It's doing incredible things, but you cannot build everything on top of it yourself. So you try to outsource it to other people. How do you do that? You create a way for these people to access what you did. So we need to find a canal or a way to actually provide your service or your model to other people to use it for their own use cases. And then here comes API and SDKs. So what's an API or an SDK? An API is actually an application programming interface. It's an interface that helps you access functionality from a system, but restricted. So it's like a proxy. So you have here your system. Okay, let's say this is your app, and you have a kind of proxy here that give you access to certain part of this infrastructure or this application. And you have here a system, that this system is the LLM, for example. Sorry for my handwriting. So your app will go through this API. This entry point is actually like the door. It will allow you to do some things on the model that's being created here. So you actually define at this specific place how everything is being handled. And this specific place is actually an API. So we need to understand a bit more what is an API today. So normally in programming languages, if you have ever built something with a programming language before, you have libraries. So for example, if you take Python, when you want to deal with networks and web applications and routing and everything, you can either do it yourself or you can do it with an application or a library. This library can be FastAPI or Django. Let's choose FastAPI. If you choose FastAPI, what you are doing is actually using pre-written functions to access a much more complex implementation of that logic, right? So this function is actually like an interface for you to access that. This is actually an API. Same for when you try to logging into any other system. What's happening here is that this system will connect to some other kind of interface, and this interface will allow the system to perform some things. So let's take a really simple example here. So you go to ChatGPT and you go to the inspect, you go to network tab, and you try to type something like hello world. You will see that there are some things happening here. These things are actually calling an interface to ask for some specific informations. So this app that you're trying to interact with right now is asking to some kind of system, can you autocomplete this for me? This guy said hello world. What else can come after hello world? And then the system will just say, okay, this is your response. So you, as the front end or as this app, you don't need to understand or know what's happening under the hood of this system. You just need an entry point and an output format. Okay. And this is your communication scheme. And same for all the systems that have been built using LLMs. You need to access some kind of API. And as we already presented them, I'll just show you here what those API are for Anthropic and OpenAI. So here, if you go to the OpenAI documentation, you will see here OpenAI developer platform. So if you go to the quick start page, you'll see here that you have they're explaining how to access your model. You need OpenAI key, of course. So what you need to do is to go to your account, go here, and then your profile, and then API keys. So when you click on API key, you will generate a new API key. create a new API key, and you give a name, and you select a project, and you create a new API key. And then this API key will actually be like your pass. So here, this guy will say, oh, do you have an API key? Is it valid? Okay, I can give you access to all this system. But if you don't have an API key, let's say you are someone in red here, you come here without an API key, it will say, no, I cannot give you access to my LLM. You need some kind of key to access this party. I don't know how it calls. So this is the role of an API, to actually be the proxy between everyone accessing a system and the system itself. And in our case here, the system is the LLM. It can be OpenAI LLMs, Anthropic LLMs, or whatever else. And as you can see here, when you get your API key, you can go back to the documentation again and go to the quick start. When you get the key, you need to click here. You have a kind of standard way of accessing this API. This is a normal HTTP request. So normally, whatever you do in the browser, it's actually sending some kind of HTTP request. So if you copy this link here and go into Postman, so it's simple, just type Postman on Google, you create an account. And you're able to access it. I'm already logged in. So normally you create an account and you have access to Postman. Otherwise, you can download the app as well on your local computer, and you have access to Postman as well. But if you have any question, let me know in the comment. I will help you. I will do a simple tutorial presenting Postman if you don't know how to use it. But here in Postman, if you paste the URL here, and you need to come to the authorization here, they mention in the API that you need the header authorization. So you need to come here, authorization, URL token, and paste your API key. And then content type application JSON, normally it's by default. So we have here content type application JSON. And you are now able to access the system. So you have the keys. You have access to the party. So you can just come here, copy this, and now you can ask whatever you want to the model. So if you ask here, tell me more about yourself, and we send this, it takes some time, it verifies your key, make sure everything's good, and you get a response from the AI. So this is the base way to access this API. As you can see in the name, we have API already. I am an AI language developed by OpenAI. This is the response that you get from the model. This is the format that you agree on with the provider of the API. You actually need to have 3 different components to access this specific API. You need a key, you need some kind of headers. This is simple things. You need some kind of input, and this input will be how the system agree that you will communicate with them using that specific format, and you get some kind of output. And this output is actually what they prepare for you, and you get the output and you work with it. This is like the application programming interface. So this is the interface between you, your app actually, and the system, which is LLM in our case. So it can be anything. GitHub has a public API. SpaceX has a public API. You have a lot of applications that have APIs out there. Google Drive, Google have an API for you to manipulate your files. So a lot of systems out there have APIs, and these APIs are all the way for you to access their system, but in a protected way. So they can manage what you're doing, where you're doing it, and how you're doing it. So that's the reason why you actually most of the time need a key to access these systems. Now, you can see that doing this is kind of tedious, okay? If you're building an app, sending HTTP requests for everything that you need to do is hard. It's just repetitive. You need to build everything yourself. You need to understand how their system work inherently. You need to understand, okay, I need to send this format, and I'm getting this format. And they have so many different formats here. So if you check for after authentication, you will see you need temperature. So you need to understand a bit more, getting into a bit more what they are offering in the API. You don't have to do that, right? We need a simple way. We have a simple way to actually access these systems. This is what we call an SDK. An SDK is actually a software development kit, which is provided most of the time by this API reference. This is the API reference just in case you need to, do it manually using API, role developer, the header, you need to set them yourself, the key and everything. But they provide also an SDK. So the SDK is a simplified way of for you to access these systems. So if you come here again and you come to the JavaScript, you will see that you install this and you just directly use the system without having to care about which URL it's using under the hood, which headers it is adding, and where to put the authorization key. You just have like a simple interface that will help you access these systems. So this is what you call an SDK. So normally when you develop an API, you have a layer on top of it that will help facilitate access to your API, which is an SDK in our case. And in right now, almost all the providers have some kind of SDK or some adaptation to this SDK. The OpenAI SDK is the most popular one because they have you have a specific trick to actually support many other provider using the OpenAI SDK using the base URL. And then Anthropic also have an API reference, and they also have the SDK. So if you click here, you can get a key, of course. But in Python, you need to install a package called Anthropic, right? And this Anthropic package will give you access to this thing. You just need to say, oh, client.message, just create a new message. You pass the model, the max token, the temperature. We'll go through these parameters a bit later. And then this is the input data, and you directly get the output. But if you need to have the API reference to actually send this request yourself, this is the URL, this is the header, this is the header. You know, you need to actually set this yourself and actually manipulate the API yourself. So if we have to resume, API is actually application programming interface. It helps you access other systems, but in a secure way and in a more restricted way. So whatever you do on the Anthropic API, they will know it's you because you have a key. That's logic. So they have like a protection layer on top of your system that give you access to specific part of the system. And then to simplify things more, this provider create SDKs. And this SDK gives you much more simplicity over HTTP requests, header setting, and many other things that you can do with your system. So I think we went through everything we needed to say about API and SDK. Thank you for watching. In the next part of the tutorial, we'll talk about Python and JavaScript in general, and then the programming language we'll be using throughout the whole course. Yeah, thank you for watching and see you in the next part of this crash course.